problems?
Yeah, it's called running on concrete for about 6 days straight.
What are you running on concrete for?
You're recording. I couldn't say.
All right, leaving pit lane here. We'll just take our time down pit lane. No reason to turn the wheel and scrub the tires and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Just kind of take your time down pit lane. When we get down here to the end of pit lane, there's some cones out here to kind of push you out nice and wide. The reason why we're doing this is so we have an opportunity to look down the front straight. So come down pit lane, come to a stop, look down the front straight. If it's clear, go ahead and go. If not, obviously you do not want to go. We're just going to warm up for about half a lap, 3/4 of a lap here. So we'll get the third gear, come into turn 2, on the brakes, down in the second, looking across the corner to our apex. Now we're going to start rolling on the throttle. Go up in the third gear. Hit the apex at 3, not on the curb though. Hit the track out curbing out of 3. This first cone on our left is a lift cone. We're going to lift, turn in, get the car straight. Now we're going to get on the brakes. Down to second, looking across the corner to our apex. Squeezing back down on the throttle. Track out onto the concrete, coming out of 5. Bring the car over to the left. Get it nice and straight for 6. Down to second, trailing off. Looking through the corner, touching the curb. Now we're going to start to get on into here a little bit. Our shift point's going to be 6,500 RPM, so we don't want to go too much over that. Start hitting the rev limiter. On the brakes for 7, down to second, trailing off. Nice patience corner. You got to just slowly turn the wheel. Up to third, 50% brake, looking at turn 8, squeezing on the throttle. Halfway up the curb in 8, halfway up the curb in 9, over the concrete in 10. Get to 65, fourth gear, approaching turn 1. We're going to brake about the 2 cone. Into third, trailing off, looking at the apex, squeezing on the throttle, on the curb, keep it on the asphalt, the exit, on the brakes for 2, looking across the corner to the apex, long trail brake, squeeze on the throttle, out about to middle of the track, up to third, at the exit, up on the curbing, keep it in third. I'm going to bounce off the limiter here just for a little bit going into 4 and 5, just because I had a really good run out of 2. Down to second, trailing off, squeezing on the throttle. Track out on the concrete, up to third. Nice and straight line, braking for 6. Down to second, trailing off, squeezing on the throttle. Up on the apex curb there. On the concrete, bring it back on the asphalt or else you go into the pothole. In third gear now. On the brakes for 7, down to second, trailing off, looking through the corner, squeezing on the throttle, touching half the apex curb there. Up to third, right brake, turn in, squeeze on the throttle, hit the curb there in 8, hit the curb at 9, over the concrete 10, 6,500, fourth gear. On the brakes here for turn 1. Looking through the corner, trailing off, squeezing on the throttle, full throttle before the apex. On the brakes, down to second, looking through the corner, trailing off, squeezing on the throttle. Up into third, the apex of 3, just keep your foot down. Car has plenty to stick through there. Approaching turn 4, I'm going to just hit the limiter a little bit again, because got a good run again. On the brakes, straight line braking it for 4 and 5, trailing off, squeezing on the throttle, tracking out on the concrete coming out of 5. Bring the car over to the left, straight line brake it, on the brake, down to second, trailing off, squeezing on the throttle, hit the curb there a little bit. I had to do a very minute lift right there because the car started to push. You need to be able to catch that before you end up off the track. On the brakes, down to second, trailing off, squeezing, full throttle at the apex, up up on the apex curb, exit curbing at the exit. Light brake, looking through the corner. Up on the curb, halfway in 9. Over the concrete, 10. 6,500, up the 4th gear. One more lap here. On the brakes, down the 2nd, down the 3rd. Squeezing on the throttle. Full throttle by the apex. On the brakes, down the 2nd, trail, looking through the corner. Get the car pointed, squeeze on the throttle. Up in the 3rd. Over the curb at the exit. Again, gonna touch the limiter here just a little bit. Turn in, get the car straight. On the brakes, down the 2nd, trailing off. Don't stare at that cone too long. Look across the corner to the apex. Track out. On the concrete, up the 3rd gear, right at the exit. Bring the car over, get it straight. Down the 2nd, looking at the apex already. Up on the curb. Out on the concrete, up in the 3rd gear. Relax when you get on the straights. Trailing off the brakes now. Now we're going to start to cool it down. In the 3rd gear here. Don't forget, when you get on the straights, you want to look at the gauges, see what's going on, check your mirrors, see if there's anyone behind you. And now as we're pulling in, we're putting the hand up before we get to turn 8, or right at turn 8. And just cruise nice and slowly into pit lane. Put the car in 1st gear and shut the engine off. Do not use the e-brake when you come into pit lane. So 1st gear, shut the engine off so it doesn't roll. And that's a lap around the Derrick Daily Speedway.